Just to be a little playful with you, I would actually say that women are the direction. The feminine is the direction. A woman lit up and really dropped into, like, connected to her desire, that is his direction. I think he's the engine, not the driver.
Hmm.
We have to benevolently influence one another in order to have a good relationship. I think the enemy for a woman in a relationship with a man is.
Welcome to the Vibrant Couple. Today I have invited Kristy Scher, who is the creator of The Way of the Adored Woman. So Kristy, you, about 24 years into a marriage that was polite but disconnected, you made a big change, and now your husband adores you, and you work with women to help them create the same thing in their own lives. So, welcome. And first, what are men women's worst enemy?
Hmm. Well, thank you so much, Valdo. So lovely to be here with you. And that is such a, I think, a difficult and really important question, especially right now. I think we're in a time where there is an apparent widening of the divide between men and women. I think that social media is absolutely implicated in this. It is a space that the more time you spend in it, the more outrage, the more sort of siloed we can become in our thinking. And and I think also culturally, we have been in this massive transition, a developmental leap over the last, I would say, really since the 1970s, transitioning out of one predominant way of men and women relating. And I think that we are still in, like a kind of emotional adolescence with regard to men and women's relationships. And women have really transformed in terms of how they take up space and how we take up space and what we create and our power in different areas of life. And that's great and necessary. And I think that there has been a lag in the relationship between men and women and how, like, what the roles are. What's my role and what's his role? And I think men have, for many reasons, particularly in the United States, experienced a kind of decline. Women have been experiencing a type of, expansion, and that has been, I believe, reflected inside of our personal relationships and our relationships at a cultural level. And then there's the issue of, patriarchy. It's the P word. It's the other P word that
Yeah.
nobody likes, that nobody feels that comfortable talking about. And I think that has, as a woman, that has profoundly shaped my life. That physically, I am constantly aware of my safety. And while I believe there are truly many good men, I believe fundamentally that most men are good men. The reality is that 1 in 3 women has been sexually assaulted or sexually abused in her lifetime, many as children. And the greatest fear that a man, typically, generally speaking, is going to have is that he's going to be ridiculed by a woman. But the greatest fear a woman has is that she's going to be killed by a man. And all of that is in the background of our relationships between men and women, just generally. And when we bring it down into a relationship between one man and one woman, my experience is that there is always a question of power. But I don't actually believe that that is like a power over. I believe that what makes for a great relationship is two people who are relationally powerful. And that means relationally skillful.
I
And
fully,
most of us have not been taught the skills of how to have a great relationship.
I fully agree. And so I want to clarify to listeners that this conversation is not for people who want to blame men or women. This is about learning power with two equally powerful people who have equal value but are just different and who are honored and honor each other for their differences. So if you somehow watch this podcast because the title interested you and you feel shitty about your life and you think blaming men or blaming women is the way out, please swipe left. But if you are interested in learning how can men and women, post-patriarchy, can learn to become great partners, lovers of equal value, please keep on listening.
Yeah, I think that it's really important to understand that blame is a non-skillful behavior. Fundamentally, it's not effective if what you want is a good relationship.
So many men feel blamed by women.
Yeah, I think many men are blamed by women.
And so is that built it into feminine beings to blame men?
Well, to be really honest, I have seen as much blaming of women by men. So I don't think it's actually built into being a woman. I do think that there is a difference in, I mean, our brains are structurally different. Our brains are, we do not have the same kind of brain as a man. And I believe that there is women, I have a gestalt-oriented brain. Our brain is actually designed to see the big picture and to see a lot of different little pieces as opposed to being more of a linear, like proceed from one thing to the next. We are more right-brained. Men tend to be more left-brain dominant. And that's a huge generalization. Women have great left brain, men have great right brain capacities, but the feminine brain has bigger, like a larger corpus callosum, which is
Yep.
the part that connects the two sides, the two hemispheres. We also have more connectivity between hemispheres and front to back in the hemispheres. And that means we're going to see a lot more, and we're going to see a lot more of what's wrong.
So I'm fully in line with you that blaming is immaturity, not man woman. And that one of the gifts that women bring to a partnership is that diffuse awareness in which they see everything. And one of the gifts and curses that men bring to a partnership is that ability to focus. Because if a man wants sex and he avoids everything else, including the connection and the preliminaries and this and her feeling safe, is not going to go well.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the thing is, I talk to a lot of men as well because I work with couples and I work with women. And I hear from a lot of men that they want to feel safe. They want to feel emotionally safe. And that one of the things that feels unsafe to a man is to be on the receiving end of criticism.
Yep.
And I think it's important to distinguish between criticism and giving you feedback. And while many people, because I work with brilliant, soulful, intelligent, like very studied, like people who've done a lot of work, but on an intellectual level, we may not actually catch that what we're doing is coming through to the other person as criticism. And that is one of the places where I think women, shoot themselves in the foot, is to be having this sort of vision for what's missing. I literally think of it as like what's missing vision,
Yep.
which is so important. My training is as a nurse. And, I'm really good at walking into a room and assessing for what is the problem. That was my livelihood for 12 years. And that's critical. And women actually can do that instantly. We know exactly what's not working. But when we lead with that, where you can't tell, like you couldn't get into a cab and say, "Don't take me to that place." But a lot of women, that's what they do. They get into their relationship cab and they say to their man, I don't like this, I don't like this, you did this, you did this. And he's like, well, like, I don't know where to go.
I'm fully with you because not understanding of that when you criticize a man or when you tell him what to do, the man will not change like a woman do. The man will just avoid going in that situation again.
Yeah.
And avoiding is the opposite of connection.
True. I would actually say, I mean, just to be a little playful with you, I would actually say that women are the direction. The feminine is the direction. The it's her desire, a woman lit up and really dropped into, like, connected to her desire, that is his direction. I think he's the engine, not the driver.
Okay, so I'm loving this because there are so many definitions of masculine and feminine. And
Hmm.
so and too much the belief is leading is where we're going
Yeah.
because if a woman leads with connection and love and joy, this is wonderful.
Yeah. I think that, like, I love polarity. I love the idea of it. I love the experience of it inside of my marriage. I love how it feels. I think that there is much truth in it. And just like any lens, just like we should not mistake the map for the territory, we should
Yeah.
not mistake the lens for the subject. And polarity as a lens is a really, for me, it's an important one. I'm going to say as an aside that in my world, polarity is the outcome of maturity.
I love it. Yeah.
It's not the means and it's not the goal. It is an outcome. But when we're talking about leadership, so like I think in the polarity world, in the masculine feminine relating worlds, there's a whole lot of talk about leadership, and what happens on, behind closed doors with women is hearing things like, he won't lead. I can't really get anything that I want because if I lead, then I'm taking the masculine role. And that's where I think polarity talk has really messed up a lot of people. I think it's gotten people
I
really
got it.
confused because a
It,
woman who is self-possessed, a woman who is relationally powerful, who knows herself, who is turned on by what she wants and likes and longs for and desires, is actually going to lead in her relationship, and that's actually essential to a man.
because
It
that's
gives him.
magnetic.
It
That's
is.
magnetic to a man. There is
Yeah.
nothing better than a woman who is in her feminine and is not faking it because she's getting paid or whatever transactional stuff is going on.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
I think a lot of women are confused and discouraged and frustrated when they don't know how to get what it is they want in their relationship without sort of stepping into sort of either control or overbearing, um, you know, what feels like manipulation, like how a man might call manipulation. And this is what I mean by being relationally powerful, is that it's actually the capacity to know what we want. So this is differentiation, to know what I want and to be able to vulnerably reveal that while holding on to the tension that I feel about whether or not you're going to move towards me knowing what I want, or that you're going to actually move away from me knowing what I want. And that ability to hold on to myself in that tension, to be rooted in myself while being accessible to somebody else, that is where we start to cultivate relational power and the rightful kind of influence, because relationships are defined by influence. We have to benevolently influence one another in order to have a good relationship.
I fully agree with you. So before we go and talk about what a powerful, a power with adored woman is, I want to complete our conversation on our women's worst enemies. And I am not talking about abuse because, you know, the statistics say that 20% of men abuse women. I'm not talking about, overly archaic marriages in which men say, you know, woman, I spoke, I'm the law. I'm not talking about that whatsoever. I'm talking about a good man who really wants his woman to be happy, and a good woman who really wants to play with, but somehow cannot get there. So from in that play field, are men women's worst enemy?
Thank you for clarifying the question. That actually really helps me narrow into, like, really feel into the thing that is important to say. I would say, just on the surface level, no. What is the enemy for both of us is not actually understanding how a man's brain and emotional system works, and not being self-possessed. I think self-possession is an essential quality for a woman in any relationship, and understanding how a man is different, you know, like that his brain functions differently, that his emotional conditioning is different, that his needs, wants, wishes might be slightly different. I actually think that they're a lot more the same than they are different. I think the enemy for a woman in a relationship with a man is her own nervous system fluency, her own relational skillfulness, and her ability to bridge the difference between us and still inhabit herself. So being able to sit inside of somebody else's world, that is intimacy. I'm going to enter into your world and understand what it's like, but to do that without losing my root in myself. I think that those are probably more if there is an enemy, if there is something to address, it's probably more in that realm.
So, to simplify, we are born totally dependent, then we become codependent, then we learn some form of dependency that has a lot of independence, like, I want my independence, and that's really important to have that, as we mature. And then it's really important to learn to become more and more interdependent, in which we are both equals, dancing together.
Yeah, I think that's the fundamental conflict of intimacy is, how do we experience connection without losing ourselves? How do we experience enough distance without falling out of connection? Like, we need to be a separate self, and we also need to have closeness. And separate and close are, like, separateness and togetherness are seemingly opposites. And the emotional skill that requires is actually what I think the entire purpose of a relationship is to grow in us the capacity to have a great relationship. I think that's the purpose, not the prerequisite.
I'm in fully in line. So I want to close part one of our conversation because it's much easier to click on a 15-minute video than on a 45. And listeners, we are going to talk about what an adored woman is.